Our next speaker tonight is, well, actually, let's introduce the panel. So panel 2 is really how to combat climate change with the new technologies that have been developed. Although technology by itself is never the sole solution, it is one of the tools we can use to help to change the narrative, to help to fix different aspects of society that are maybe challenging for folks. And there's many amazing programs being done. Our first speaker, Alex Torrealbaint, will talk about that, especially from his perspective, from the Sierra Club as well, the Atlantic chapter, about the clean energy research and advocacy that he's doing. Alexander is currently a student at Dalhousie University's College of Sustainability in the co-op program. He has a particular interest in renewable energy and energy storage technologies, as well as the intersection with environmental racism and the impact of colonization on Indigenous peoples and the environment. He is an active member of the Southeastern Community Health Board and has already earned a remarkable number of awards and academic distinctions in the work that he's done. Alexander, a pleasure. Thank you very much for being here, and we look forward to hearing your experience and your perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Yusuf, for that introduction. So hello, everyone. Before I get started with my presentation, since I think I'm the only one calling in so far from the East Coast, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that I'm a settler on the unceded ancestral territories of the Mi'kmaq peoples. I'm calling in today from Chibuktuk, which some of you may know as Halifax, Nova Scotia. So yeah, like Yusuf said, my name's Alex Torrealbaint. My pronouns are he, him. I am 19 years old and I'm a first-year student at the Dalhousie University College of Sustainability. I'm also a clean energy researcher and advocate with the Sierra Club of Canada's Atlantic chapter. First off, before I get started, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for sharing your stories and discussing all the amazing work that you're doing. I really love attending events and panels like this because as a young person, I think it's easy to be overwhelmed by news and media coverage on environmental and social justice issues, like some have said tonight. But I think with hearing your stories and amplifying your efforts of advocacy, it's a really great way to provide hope in some issues that can at times feel unavoidable. So a bit about myself, I'm in my first year of a BSc in Environment, Sustainability, and Society, which is also known as ESS, at Dal's College of Sustainability. And the ESS program is a really special program that takes a solutions-based and interdisciplinary approach to achieving sustainability in all sectors and aspects of our lives. So at the start of your degree, we learn about complex, current real-world sustainability challenges. And throughout the degree, we learn how to tackle and solve these issues with a variety of different perspectives, approaches, and techniques. One of the main focuses of the college that I think is really important is the incorporation of Indigenous perspectives when combating many of the complex issues people have discussed today. As settlers, I think it's really important for us to remember that Indigenous peoples have lived off the land sustainably on what some now call North America for over 13,000 years prior to settler contact. And I have to say, since learning so much about Indigenous perspectives and teachings over my first year, I realize now how little the Nova Scotia education system has taught me about true Indigenous history. I've now learned from my degree how imperative it is to incorporate Indigenous perspectives and knowledge if we want to achieve a sustainable and equitable future. And one thing this has helped me to realize, like some have discussed today, is how it's impossible to separate issues of environmentalism, racism, social justice. You cannot focus on one and ignore the others because all of these issues have subsequent effects on each other. And many of their roots are from our societal and economic structures that we as youth have the power to dismantle. So becoming a part of an environmental organization like Sierra Club Atlantic has given me so many different opportunities that I'm really grateful for. I'm a clean energy researcher and advocate. So a lot of what I do is research information that contributes to Sierra Club Atlantic's advocacy efforts at that time. So yeah, and anyone who works in that domain knows that advocacy efforts are very reactive. So over the summer, the main array of projects I'd been working on were climate policy reports based on some changes in government policy and some issues with current programs. And unlike some of the other provinces I've heard people talk about today, Nova Scotia's largest carbon emitting source is our energy sector. Is our energy sector. So unlike the other ones, that's our largest source of carbon and CO2 equivalent emissions. And our utility is heavily reliant on coal, petcoke, and they're starting to move towards natural gas as a transition fuel. And I think we all know where that leads, but I'm saying this all because working on public consultation reports and getting involved in organizations opens the door for productive conversations. So because of this, a few weeks back, I had the opportunity to meet with the CEO and the COO of Nova Scotia Power to discuss their climate goals and their planned transition to natural gas. And just yesterday, I got to meet with some representatives from Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change to talk about some of their goals as well. So I'll let the people who have a bit more of an education on this than me discuss the inner workings of how clean energy technologies actually work. But I think it's really important for us as youth to fight for energy portfolios that consist of renewable energy that is backed up by wind and solar, that consist of renewable energy like wind and solar, and that are backed up by storage technologies, whether that's more traditional ones like battery storage or compressed air or hydro, or even some of the new innovative storage technologies like gravity or molten salt storage I heard about recently. Additionally, when transitioning to renewable energy, I think it's really important to consider the entire circle of consumption. It's irresponsible to create, for example, a large amount of solar panels without having proper recycling regulations in place to deal with the rare earth metals at the end of their life, because even renewables have carbon footprints during their manufacturing process. Now, for a bit of a smaller scale, I collaborated on a report that Sierra Club released based on Halifax's most recent regional plan. And I think like that circular economy idea I just mentioned, it's a really important thing to keep in mind when planning a city. As some of you may know, urban sprawl is a huge contributor to climate change as it causes cities to expand services and infrastructure into farther out areas rather than having a more dense and efficiently planned city. So moving forward, our cities need to be planned in a way that compensates for population increase, that have proper EV and public transit infrastructure, that incentivize residents to build with green roofs, cool roofs, solar roofs, proper insulation, all these things that contribute to the sustainability of our cities. Now, one thing far too many BIPOC Nova Scotian communities experience, as I've heard people talk about today, not in specifically Nova Scotia, but in their areas, but is environmental racism, whether that's North and East Preston that have had to fight for sidewalk infrastructure and to lower speed limits on a highway that goes in front of a daycare and a community center, or South End Shelburne in Nova Scotia, a Black community where residents have been experiencing a drastic increase in environmental toxin-based cancers due to a landfill that was placed in their community. Or the Pictou Landing First Nations, an Indigenous community in Nova Scotia based around Boat Harbor, where a nearby pulp and paper mill had been dumping toxic industrial effluent into this community for decades. Now, those last two, if anyone's interested in learning more about those examples, I would highly encourage you to read the book There's Something in the Water by Dr. Ingrid Waldron, or to watch the movie with the same name. It's a very good watch. So another example of environmental racism that the Sierra Club was able to advocate against was the proposed Goldboro LNG plant. Now, I won't get into today the numerous environmental issues associated with liquefied natural gas and the treatment and extraction of fracked gas, but I will say that a proposed LNG facility here in Nova Scotia would not only drastically increase Nova Scotia's provincial GHG emissions, but it was also proposed to be constructed with a man camp near multiple Indigenous communities. And this proposed man camp would be what's called a migrant worker society. So some of you might be familiar with Fort McMurray in Alberta, which is an example of this. And now the problem with these migrant worker societies is that because of the isolation they experience from family, friends, and basically anyone outside of their job, these environments experience far higher rates of drug abuse, of sexual assault. And this is, of course, a huge issue for Indigenous women in Nova Scotia that are already at a much higher risk of these forms of violence. Luckily, with the support of Nova Scotians and advocacy efforts from different groups, I'd like to especially highlight the work of the Mi'kmaq Grandmothers Association. The company Pure Day Energy did not receive their federal funding by the deadline. So some good news on that front. Now, the reason I'm explaining these examples of what the last few months of my life and my job has looked like is because I want youth watching this today to know that within this domain, there are so many different ways to get involved. And that can look very different from what myself and other panelists today have discussed. You could be involved in a local environmental organization. You could sign petitions and educate your friends and family, or so many other things, because I think with an issue as intricate and complicated as climate change, we need people from different backgrounds, from different perspectives to be educated on these issues and to be talking about these issues. You know, not only is this a growing area of study with different opportunities for careers, but environmentalism, social justice, anti-racism, these are all topics that will only become more important and dire if we don't see systemic change in the coming decades. And that power for change is within our youth. Environmental and social activism, like I said, is reactive, based on decisions made by elected officials. And I want to point out another thing, like many people have been saying in this call. So all of my age of majority youth, for me personally, it's election season, provincial election season here in Nova Scotia right now. I'm going to be voting in my first ever provincial election tomorrow. So yeah, please remember the importance of intersectional environmentalism, social policies when you cast your ballots, because voting is what determines these types of policies we'll see in the coming years. So if you're watching this today, I'm so proud of you. I'm very glad you're interested in environmentalism and anti-racism, because things like this are an amazing step. Now let's keep on fighting because there's still work to do, but I'm excited to see what the future holds. And yeah, that is about all I have to say for my presentation. And I see on my timer on the side that I'm right about at my time. So Yusuf, I'll hand it back over to you. But before I go, I wanted to thank everyone for listening, and thank you everyone for being here and sharing your stories. And thank you to Yusuf and all the organizers for having me here today and giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Alexander. And I have to say that the phone call that we had earlier in the week was so amazing. Like, I was looking forward to hearing your speech today, and it really hit home because it touched on what we're trying to do here, which is show that the issue is really one of multiple issues, all leading towards hopefully a solution. So, you know, highlighting the role of urban design, as well as how that relates to technological innovation, relating to the development of those technological innovations not impacting negatively the environment. Like, these are the kind of ideas that we want to put into people's minds, to help them think about, to help them relate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So again, thank you so much. It's exactly what we hope to achieve on this event today, is to hear from youth leaders such as yourself. And I'm really happy to hear you'll be voting. I congratulate you on that.
Yes.
You know, I come from a generation where it took me into my late 20s to start being politically active in the democratic process. So it's really inspiring to see the work you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alexander.